Oh, geez. My apologies. I seem to be having Comcast problems. So my internet just came back. So Judy, would you, is the directions on this email in case I need to call, this is the, if I have to call in, it's the,
I'll send you the call-in numbers.
thank you. I appreciate it. I'm so sorry. Comcast did not agree with the 5:45 start time at all. Sorry, John Graham. I'm so sorry, Mayor.
No, that's okay. I had problems too, and mine was simply finding the link, so that was my bad. So okay,
Oh.
looks like we're all here. Let's go ahead and I'll call this meeting to order. It's the August 4th, 2020 regular meeting of the Manitou Springs City Council. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if the city clerk would please display the American flag.
Just a second here.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To
to the
Republic,
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If the city clerk would please call the roll.
Yes. Council members. Edith Chandler.
Present.
Steve Brimner.
Here.
John Chada.
Here.
John Chada.
Here.
Thank you. Councilor Susan Wolbrook.
here.
Councilor Julie Wolf. Mayor Pro Tem Nancy Fortune.
Present.
And Mayor John Graham.
Great. Thank you. Next item of business is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda as shown. I'll second that.
A second discussion? Not, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand. Looks good. Passed unanimously. Thank you. Next item is public comment on non-agenda items. Judy, do we have anyone wishing to speak on a non-agenda item?
You check for any raised hands here. Okay, if anyone wishes to speak, if they could do the raise hand tool. At this time, I do not see any hands being raised. Still no hands raised.
No, sorry, Judy.
I said still no hands are raised.
And did anyone contact you regarding wanting to speak at non-agenda?
No.
Okay. Let's go ahead then with item F, the consent calendar. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move we approve the consent calendar as shown. Again, I'll second that.
Vote. All in favor, say aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, next item of business, item G1, it's a hearing. This is ordinance number 1120, an ordinance amending section 5.09.170 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code to extend the hours of operation of medical marijuana centers and retail marijuana stores to midnight. We'll begin with staff presentation, and there will be a public hearing.
Okay, so I'm bringing Christine Lowenberg over.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good
Hello,
evening.
Christine.
Is it just you for this presentation, Christine?
For this item, yes,
Okay.
it'll be just me.
Okay, so Christine, if you'd go ahead and present on this, and then we'll follow that with the public hearing portion.
Sure, absolutely. I won't restate everything that I said in the last one, but I will touch on that briefly. So good evening, I'm Christine Lowenberg, Planning Director for the City of Manitou Springs. As you noted, tonight serves as the extension of a second reading and public hearing regarding this ordinance 1120, which will extend the hours of operation for establishments and marijuana industry here in Manitou Springs. Since our last meeting, we have received several more comments and input. 4 of those that I received were in support of the action. 1 was not in favor, and another had specific operational comments and suggestions on the matter that were hoped to be mentioned here, but not necessarily entered into the formal record as a part of what the planning department or the city put forth. And that was a suggestion to consider modifying the approach such that they work certain days or certain periods of the year. I am not aware that there is someone who would be standing by ready to speak or has specific comments. I'm not sure if Judy has received that in the time since we last spoke. But with that, I will respond to any questions or concerns that this body or the public has regarding this ordinance.
Councilor Wolf? Councilor Wolf?
Thank you. Hi, Christine. I noticed in the packet it said that staff supports this proposal. Can you speak to why staff supports this?
Staff, when we did some investigating as to whether the existence of marijuana industry in Manitou Springs has contributed to or increased actual crime. That was one of the points of concern. Chief Churchill indicated that based on his research and speaking with the folks in his department, that there had not been. There has been some rhetorical discussion about whether or not that is the case. I was not able to confirm that there has been an increase in crime. Within existing municipal code and use permits that these businesses have, I did not find a reason to object to this. And as well, because this initiative did seem to initiate in the community and with members of council, it seemed like it has the support of the community. And again, I did not receive substantial feedback to contradict that. There seemed to generally be support of this. So in light of that, and the businesses gave feedback that they felt that this could be an opportunity for them to expand their business operations slightly. Whether that spreads customers out throughout the day or actually generates increased revenue, I think is yet to be determined. But either way, they were favorable to this. So given that they're all stakeholders concerned generally seem to be in support of this, the planning department felt like we could be in support of this as well.
Councilor Wolf?
You cut out at me, Christine, at the beginning, and the part that I missed was something about crime. Did you say that the police reported no crime at all associated with these 2 stores, or what? It got all garbled and I couldn't hear what you were saying for a few sentences there. So I just wanted to confirm, because that was the important part to me.
Sure. No, thank you for clarifying that. I'm on Comcast, just like Councilor Wolbrook, so I may have some challenges. Today has been a difficult day to be online for sure. No, one of the points of interest when this came up was to discern whether there was had been a measurable increase in crime specifically associated with marijuana in the community, and if expanding these hours would further that, or there would not be an impact. For that, that was a point of conversation and investigation that Chief Churchill came alongside me and looked at what has been reported. There has been some discussion that there may be some activities that haven't been reported, but I don't find that to be the case. I was not able to substantiate that.
So when you say activities may not have been reported, is that your way of saying there's no evidence of any crime associated with these stores since they opened? And if that's not what you mean, can you explain what you mean?
Other than what the police department has received complaints for and official filings, which was substantially not higher than drug-related crime before these were opened, that's what I'm referring to. Does that make sense?
I'm confused. Maybe other people understand. I guess that means there's no increased crime. Is that it's kind of yes or there might be increased crime. There is no. I don't know your answer. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I don't
No,
mean
that's fine. The
annoying.
police, sure, the police department did not feel that expanding the hours would lead to an increase in crime.
And that's based on their history of their crime records since the stores opened?
That is correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What we want to do is go on to the, if there are some other, if you have other questions now, that would be fine. We probably will have a chance to ask Christine other questions after the public hearing. So perhaps it would make sense to get on with that. Although if there's anyone who wants to ask a question now, raise your hand, please. Okay, seeing no hands, I think we'll go ahead and begin with the public hearing. I'm sorry, Mr. Shada?
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that this is a continuation of our public hearing from our last meeting, right?
Yes, that's correct. So that's a good point. And I will go ahead and open the public hearing. And with that, I will mention that we had started the public hearing 2 weeks ago at our regular meeting, and then we had so many technical difficulties, and people were having difficulty logging into the Zoom session that we decided that the appropriate thing to do would be to postpone this and hope that we had better technical conditions tonight. So for that reason, we will continue the public hearing. So Judy, do we have anyone wishing to speak?
So if we could just make a statement, if anybody would like to speak on this in the public hearing, if they could use the raise hand tool so I can identify
Right.
fire to speak.
Right.
At this time, I don't see any hands that are being raised.
I see no hands. Okay.
Give it a
Um,
moment here.
Okay. And did anyone contact you wishing to indicating they wanted to speak? Okay.
No, Mayor. Okay, still no hands.
Still no hands. Okay. Well, if there are no objections, I will go ahead and close the public hearing then. Seeing no objections, the public hearing is closed. Do we have any additional questions for Christine? It appears we don't. So I guess we're at a point where we can entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'd like to move that we approve ordinance number 1120, an ordinance amending section 5.09.170 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code to extend the hours of operation of medical marijuana centers and retail marijuana stores to midnight.
We have a second from Councilor Wolf.
I'll second that.
And okay, seconded by Councilor Wolf. Okay. Councilor Wilbrook?
Yes, I have a couple of points of discussion about this. One is I'm delighted to hear that we can't attribute any crime to marijuana stores being open in our town since we started that. I think that's wonderful news. I do think that this is uncharted territory. It's a different time of day, and to make assumptions that it won't be a problem is, you know, maybe good based on the evidence that we have so far, but still we don't have anything to go on. So one thing that I might propose is that we do this for a period of time and see how it goes and revisit it. And there's a reason that I'm saying this that has to do with more than just the things that I've mentioned before, which I won't repeat. And that's that we've had, you know, I think the people who may have been opposed to this in the beginning have done a good job of trying to ensure that even though they did not prevail on this ballot issue, that this is done in a way that fits our community. And that's one of the reasons that our hours started out where they did in the beginning. Now, I'm going to give you an example, and some of you may find fault with this example, and that's okay. That's part of deliberation. But, you know, we started out with a single trash hauler, Best Way, which was two brothers, an excellent company, excellent reputation, really some of the best customer service I've ever experienced anywhere that I've ever lived in terms of waste management services. They decided to sell, which they're absolutely entitled to do. And they were bought by a company that was much larger. And I have not heard great experiences. I even had mail in my mailbox this week about GFL. You can't reach them. You can't get them to answer email. You can't get to answer the phone. Now, at some point, maybe these owners of these two establishments will stay forever and can continue to be as attentive to our community and to our needs and responsive as they have been, for which we are very grateful. But someday they too may seek to sell and go on and do other things, whatever. And in California in particular, when they legalized marijuana, and I'm sure that if the attorneys for these two stores are on the call, they'll know this better than I will, but they gave a certain number of years before really big corporations could buy into recreational marijuana. But it's fully expected that that will happen. You will see bigger corporations like the cigarette companies and perhaps even the alcohol companies start buying smaller places, recreational shops, and start doing that because they see that they want this to be part of their portfolio. I'm very concerned that this was something that we brought forth as a council, as I've said before. We think it's going to give us some extra revenue, but we haven't really looked at the big picture down the road. And this, to me, just makes these shops even more valuable to the people who seek to buy them in the future if they do. And I tell the story of GFL because even though we just agreed to go with them again, it was with a lot of reservations that we did that. The complaints haven't stopped. The people in this community who accepted defeat, they did not win. Many of them became great advocates for the community, continued to work on this. I'm very concerned about going forward with this without any kind of time period that allows us to evaluate this time period, and I think that we're doing the industry a great favor that's in town, and I think they've been really good to us. It's nothing against them, but the future may find that we don't deal with these owners, and maybe if I'm wrong about that, Christine can address that, or Denise, or any other people on council, but I'd really like us to take a more measured approach and try this out, see how it goes. If it continues to be the way that it is, then that would show our community that we've listened to the whole community and we've agreed to give some time to see if this works. Thank you.
We're at 13 minutes.
Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you, Susan. Councilor Wolf.
Is Nancy in charge of the time now? I noticed that
Well,
she's taken over the
yes,
clock responsibilities.
Yeah, Julie, she's done that at my request because we tend to belabor a lot of subjects, and in order to get through a full evening's worth of work, I think we kind of need to stay on task. So she did that at my request and is doing it at my request. So I do appreciate that.
I didn't know if you want other people helping you, telling you how many minutes we're into the meeting. I'll let Nancy do it.
All right, thank you. We have other discussion points. I think maybe a trial period is a good idea. Would that, Councilor Wilbert, would you propose like a 3-month or 6-month period, for instance, or 1 year? Or did you have something in mind?
I think Christine may be able to speak, or even Chief Churchill, who I don't believe is on this call tonight, might be better at giving a time. I'm not a subject matter expert on it, but if I don't think it can be 90 days. I think, especially given COVID, I think it probably have to be at least 6 months. But again, I've deferred to the people who know more about this in the planning department and in law enforcement.
Do we not have a motion on the table?
We do, and I could ask that it be a friendly amendment. I can make that, but I'm asking for help from experts on what a good time frame would be.
Christine, if you could respond.
In thinking about a business cycle, typically a year is appropriate. I would comment that at any time this ordinance could be revised. I know that some folks feel it's revised ordinances. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that this is one of a number of situations that in the planning department we're monitoring, and we would be monitoring this and wouldn't hesitate to come back with a recommendation that we modify this. So that is always on the table. In considering a time frame in a business cycle, especially where we are right now, I wouldn't recommend less than a year. A year feels appropriate. If you felt like you needed to put a time frame on this, possibly even through October 1st of next year, because that gets you through the summer season, heavy tourist season. I do think asking any business to consider changing their operations during the height of tourist season can be a bit challenging. So I would suggest that if you were going to put a time frame on it, perhaps consider at least a year and through October 1st of next year.
And I would be, if Judith and Julie would both consider a friendly amendment to take that motion and just add Christine's recommendation about October 1st. That allows this council to revisit it. We're the council that put it forth. It's the same council that gets to consider it in 1 year. If you guys would accept that, thank you.
May I comment, Mayor?
Yes, please.
Well, I'm just thinking that we have quite a few safeguards in place already. That being, if we saw an increase in crime, we would hear from the police department, and if we had traffic issues, we would be hearing about those. So I feel like we have enough safeguards in place to go ahead and pass it without the amendment, and that would be my preference.
Wolf, you had seconded? You had seconded the original motion.
I would withdraw my second if we're going to have a time limit on the ordinance. I'm not in favor of that.
I don't see support for Councilor Bremner?
I would second the motion that Judith made with no timing.
I'm sorry, Steve, you were breaking up. Could you say that again?
I would second the motion that Judith made with no time limit. Second the
Oh,
motion.
I've seconded that already.
Yeah, Julie already did. Steve,
Okay,
yeah.
so we're gonna vote.
It's okay.
I just didn't want to accept the friendly amendment, but I accepted Judith's original motion that had no deadline or expiration on it.
I thought she went ahead and restated it as well.
Oh, then I'm so sorry. Then I missed it. Judith, did you restate your motion to have a deadline?
No, she
No,
didn't. That's okay. So,
I really appreciate all of us, Councilor Wolbrecht's input, and I think she's got some valid things to say. However, I am not in favor of the friendly amendment.
Okay.
Mayor, we can't hear you.
sorry. It appears we have no further discussion. We have a motion and a second. So it sounds like we're about ready to vote. So all in favor, say aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
So we have 3 in favor. We have 4. All opposed, say nay, raise hand. Nay. Okay, so motion passes 4-3. Okay, good, thank you. And I want to thank council for extending the public hearing by 2 weeks. I think probably the vote we just got was the vote we would have had 2 weeks ago, but it was, I think, sporting to give the public a chance to speak. Well, they did. Okay, thank you. Then under new business, item HI, first reading of ordinance number 1320, amending Title 5 and Title 18 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code to enact regulations pertaining to micromobility share services and micromobility businesses or operations and providing penalties for violations. Presentation by Christine and Dylan Becker. Christine?
Yes. Judy, do you see Dylan? He was
I'm
on.
bringing him over right now.
Okay, he was on a moment ago.
Evening, counselors.
Good evening, Dylan.
Dylan?
Evening, counselors.
Good evening,
Um,
Dylan. Can you hear us, Dylan?
I can hear you.
Okay,
Hopefully
great.
you can all hear me.
We can hear you. Yep. You're on.
All right. So as you know, these regulations are meant to establish micro-mobility share and micro-mobility businesses regulations and requirements to help the city achieve some of its goals set forth in the comprehensive plan that encourage bicycling, alternative modes of transportation, and to provide adequate transportation options to meet the needs of our visitors and residents, and all while ensuring, of course, the public health, safety, and welfare of our community. So I presented a draft of this ordinance to you all a couple weeks ago in a work session. Since then, none of the meat and bones of the regulations have changed. We've rearranged some things and kind of fleshed a couple of things out as far as the regulations. So the business licensing and insurance sections have been moved up into Chapter 5, which is the business license section. We also fleshed out the findings for not allowing e-scooters and e-skateboards as part of these micromobility share operations. We also added a penalties section, and in the code it references a section there in Chapter 5 as far as penalties and that are set forth also in Chapter 1.16. Another thing that was added, Julie Wolf had suggested adding some standards basically for the advertisements that can and cannot be displayed on the vehicles. And other than that, nothing else has changed. So let's see. And that's basically all that's happened since the work session meeting. So if you have any questions, last minute additions or amendments, I'd be happy to hear them.
I would add just quickly to what Dylan said, one major item that you did not see last time had to do with the establishment of fees. That was something that we did not discuss. We simply acknowledged last time that that would be done. The fees, the development of fees, I don't want to distract from the conversation around the ordinance because we do need to finalize that and identify these as two separate but related items, right? The way that those were put together was looking at this from an industry perspective, very similar to how we have established marijuana as an industry, right? We have a series of overarching ordinances and various regulations that they have to abide by, and then each business receives its business license, and as a part of that business license, the planning department does a pretty thorough investigation of their operation, looks at crime, looks at a number of different factors that are complicated beyond the typical business license application. And so that was how we derived those. So I would imagine after we get done discussing the ordinance a little bit, you guys would want to discuss the fees.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I had just a couple of questions. One was on the advertising, and first of all, I was glad to see that the whole regulation was tightened up quite a bit. So thank you for putting in that extra effort. On the advertising, could you confirm that if the language would allow us, if we get a sponsor, say Kaiser Health Organization or something like that, that we're funding the bike share, if the language allows us to include that sort of advertising.
It should. So in the regulations, chapter 1891050, C, number 2, the advertisement is on behalf of the city of Manitou Springs. Sponsors, if we had them, and they wanted to advertise.
Just as long as I wasn't sure of the language, so as long as you're comfortable with that, I'm great with that. Secondly, on page 8, under the 18.91.070A, prohibitions of riding them on sidewalks or pedestrian walkways. Does that exclude things like the creek walk and when the 10-foot quote sidewalk is put in for the MAPS program project and those sorts of pedestrian walkways?
So,
and like the paved area down in fields and so on.
So there's an ordinance that does allow, that's a separate ordinance from this, that does allow electric bicycles on creek walk.
Okay.
Basically, there's also another ordinance in place in Manitou that does not allow basically motorized vehicles or any sort of vehicles like that on the city sidewalks or walkways. I basically pulled that from an already existing ordinance, and it's also in our model traffic code that was adopted.
Yeah, I guess I would just like to take a look at that to make sure that it will allow bikes when that 10-foot walkway is put in maps, because that was part of the rationale for making it so wide.
Under this, it currently wouldn't, basically because it's not allowed under the already existing regulations. So my guess is it would take a separate ordinance to allow that.
Or
Dylan,
revise
that's
this
the
one.
creek walk though, so wouldn't that allow that? Because that
it would be a continuation. It would be considered a continuation of the creek walk, yes. But there are other sidewalks that are also probably going to be considered a continuation or a part of the creek walk. So it's just something we need to take a look at for when the creek walk is finalized and when MAPS is finalized. That's all. And it may require an adjustment to another regulation, which I do recall reading. So I just wanted to raise that as a concern. Thank you. Those are all my concerns that I have.
Do you have other information to present, or question and answer time? More questions.
Mayor, we can't hear you. If you could.
I'm sorry. Okay. Dylan, Christine, did you have a chance to finish your presentations? You did. Okay. All right. So yeah. Okay. Council, then, do we have additional questions for Christine or Dylan? Councilor Wolf. I'm sorry.
My reading of the advertising provision was different from the way I think Dylan answered the question. So doesn't it say that the advertisement has to be on behalf of, maybe I don't understand what on behalf of means. It says the you will only allow advertising on the bikes if the advertisement is, quote, on behalf of the operator. What is that supposed to mean?
That would mean that they're advertising only their business. So it would be assigned with, it would just simply be the name of their business, contact information like a website or an app or something like that. That would strictly be what that means.
So wasn't the answer just now that if Kaiser or someone came along and wanted to advertise that that's allowable under the existing ordinance? Because if so, I don't see where that would be allowed.
Correct. That would be item number 2. So that would be C2. The advertisement is on behalf of the city of Manitou Springs. So if it is something that has been expressly approved, we can do
on behalf of the city means that the city, I would suggest we change the language then, because to me, on behalf means something different than on behalf means to you. Or maybe other people will think I'm crazy. But on behalf to me means that it's a city, it's the advertising on behalf of the city, that it's advertising like this, you know, something about the city, but not something about Kaiser isn't on behalf of the city. Maybe that needs to be more explicit, because I thought that section C1 and 2 meant the advertisement will either be for the bike company themselves, like you said, with the phone number, that makes sense,
Sure.
or advertising something for Manitou, not for Kaiser or for Budweiser beer or, you know, something else.
In thinking about it, when Dylan, you can jump in anytime, you know, if it were on behalf of the city of Manitou Springs, a sponsorship, then that, in my opinion, would have to have the language that this the sponsor of the city of Manitou Springs, something to that effect. But to just have a placard that's for a third party, I don't think the language here allows that.
So does that,
I could make a suggestion, sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Parker, please.
I mean, we could basically just make a couple of wording revisions that would probably address Councilmember Wolf's concerns. The first one could be the advertisement is for the micro mobility share operator or operation, or the advertisement is for the city of Manitou Springs or a city approved sponsor, you know, or a city approved I say sponsor, that's probably the issue we're dealing with here. That might cover it.
Mayor, we can't
Can't hear you, John.
Yeah. Councilor Chandler?
Thank you. Both Councillor Wolf and Jeff Parker clarified my question. So all I have left is I just want to say kudos. I thought that this was really well done. Certainly Dylan and the rest of the planning department, I think you did a really superb job knitting this together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wolf? Councilor Wolf?
oh, thank you, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry.
So the city, if we change the wording the way Jeff Parker suggested, it sounds like that would be more in line with what was intended. If that wording is changed, and this is a question for Jeff, so if the marijuana stores or, you know, some sex toy company wants to give the city money to be sponsored and have their name on and their phone number and their advertising on the bikes, I would assume that we're not allowed to discriminate against certain businesses in favor of other businesses, and we would have to take their money and put their ad on the bike. In other words, we'd have to have standard, you know, you'd have to pay more than 5 cents. I mean, the city would have to establish some standardized protocol to allow any and all advertisers equal access to this advertising. Am I guessing that correctly?
Well, you're hitting an issue that is important, but there's actually different First Amendment law that applies to advertising that's associated with city activity. It's not quite the same as having to allow everybody equal access. It has to basically support the city's mission, support the city's purpose and values. And so we could put together, you would want to put together some guidelines that would apply to who can advertise as a city approved sponsor. But it doesn't have to be everybody. There's a lot of case law dealing with advertisements on bus stops and city property that kind of covers that. So you would have control, but you'd want to have some guidelines.
So if we don't have, so we'd need guidelines, like guidelines that you would draft, or
yeah,
when do the guidelines come into play here? Because it seems like that would have to be part of this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they'd probably want to be put in place relatively soon if we're going to actually be approving sponsors. I mean, right now we could say we're approving the ordinance, and then we're going to get guidelines together. Until guidelines are together, there's not going to be any approved sponsors.
Okay,
sorry.
That works for me. I just because I read it to mean the opposite of what it apparently was meant to mean. So now that I get it, and as long as those guidelines are maybe this should say that there shall be no advertising allowed until the city has established guidelines.
We could add, pursuant to city approved guidelines at the end of my suggested sentence, and then we'd have it in place.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Do other council members have questions or comments on this? Okay, seeing none. Would someone like to make a motion? Mayor Pro Tem?
Sure. I move to approve ordinance number 1320, amending Title 5 and Title 18 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code to enact regulations pertaining to micromobility share services and micromobility businesses or operations, and providing penalties for violations and associated fees for application to program and any technical interprofessional fees associated with program. And with the consideration that our lawyer will look at language that might meet the intent of what we discussed this evening on advertising. Is that sufficient, Jeff? Or
yeah,
we still have to reading, so
yeah, exactly. We can bring it back subject to some proposed revision, which I'll bring to you for second reading, and you can look at it again.
Okay.
Motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Motion a second. Any further discussion? If not, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, all opposed, say nay. Okay, so motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
And we're only at 16 minutes of 30 minutes, so good job.
Thank you, councilors.
Good job for everybody. Okay, thanks, Dylan. Thank you, Christine. Appreciate it. Okay. Next item, business item H2, first reading of ordinance number 1220, an ordinance amending the annual budget for fiscal year 2020. Okay, and I believe we have Becca here to walk us through this. So Judy, if you could bring Becca in.
Here she is. Here she comes.
Good evening.
Good evening, Becca. You have the floor.
Okay, on March 31st, I presented financials to City Council, including budget cuts made by staff in reaction to the decreased revenue forecast due to the COVID-19 pandemic. At that time, the city administrator enacted a hiring freeze and stopped all capital expenditures that did not have a related grant. The department heads have pared costs down wherever possible, and this amended budget includes those cuts. When the 2020 budget was appropriated, the ending fund balance for the general fund was projected to be a little over $1 million. It was $1,083,970. With this amended budget, the ending general fund unassigned fund balance is now forecasted to be almost $2 million, with $1,954,225. This is due to a better ending 2019 fund balance, and the cuts that have been enacted have exceeded the projected downturn in revenues. Now, we're monitoring the situation closely, and as long as things continue as anticipated, I am confident we will end the year with a healthy fund balance. Any questions pertaining to this amended budget? Yes, Julie?
Councilor Wolf?
Oh, thank you. Does the fund balance that you were just referring to, does that include the 1.4 million of the URA money that we took?
Yes, that does include that money.
Thank you.
I can't hear you, Mayor. Can I speak?
Sorry, Denise, you have the floor.
Yeah, and I just want to mention when you approved the URA money at the end, I said if we can save money and can give some back to them, if that's what you want to do, we can do that at the end of the year. So I told you we'd be very frugally responsible, and we are managing every penny that we have and questioning every expense.
Councilor Wilbrook? Councilor Wilbrook?
Thank
Susan?
you. Thank you,
Yeah.
John. We all got some council correspondence from Corrine Toll concerning the description of the fire department under their summary of operations. John, you probably haven't had a chance to respond to this like you usually do to council correspondence, but perhaps if John Forsett or Denise is on this call, they could tell all of us how that, whether or not her question about their description is correct. And if so, why does it, why is that so? And she certainly wasn't happy with the definition she found online that matched that description.
I don't know if John's on. When I think about how he described it, it's the fact that they wear uniforms and have this chain of command going on, and with lieutenants and names of rank that sound military-esque. But I think we could certainly change that to a more benign description than what's in there. I just never really thought about it. I don't think anyone ever caught it before.
Yeah, I believe that word has been in the budget for some time, but we can definitely change it and make sure that that's reflects as John wants it to reflect.
And in no way does a disservice to the organization by changing that word and change it. I just want to make sure that we're not rushing to change a word without fully understanding how that might impact them down the road, just because today we're not happy with this word. That's my big concern, is sometimes we rush into changing words and then we have consequences and regrets later. And I just want to make sure this isn't one of those instances.
Yeah. Well, I'll certainly check with John to see if there would be any issues with changing it. I personally can't see that there would be any, but then of course, sometimes there's things one isn't aware of. So we'll definitely reach out to him.
Yep. Do we have any other questions for Becca? Discussion of the budget? It appears there's none. It seems like we're relatively happy with the budget. I think this is better news than what we'd expected. Good. Well, this is the first reading of an ordinance, so we would entertain a motion. Councilor, Mayor Pro Tem?
Sure. I move to approve ordinance 1220, an ordinance amending the annual budget for fiscal year 2020 on first reading, with the caveat that the term paramilitary description under the fire department be assessed to see about changing it.
Motion, do we have a second?
Okay, I'll second that.
Second by Councilor Chandler. Okay, any further discussion? If not, let's vote. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Becca.
Thank you, Becca.
Okay, next item of business, consideration of approving the incline memorandum of understanding. Okay. And I believe we had a kind of a last minute change or a late change that was emailed to council members this afternoon.
Mayor, do you want to bring Dole over?
Yeah, that would be good. So Judy, if you could bring Dole in. There he is. Okay. So Dole, you have the floor. Bring us up to date.
Hello, everyone. As you guys have seen and reviewed, and based on our meeting we had with City Council a little while ago, we have since went and met with Colorado Springs. They provided comments on the document. We reviewed their comments. They reviewed our comments. And then Jeff Parker did his magic, and we were able to upload a draft MOU to you guys for your review, and that should have been the one that was in your council packet. And I can provide some dates and times of negotiations, but that's kind of the summary of it. where we are today.
Dole, do you want to mention the last little bit that we were able to get, which was under the terms, that this would stay in place until both parties agreed to a long-term number?
It's under number 6, terms.
Yeah, until a long-term solution is agreed upon by the parties.
That was the last minute change that
Yep.
Mayor was referring to.
The previous form of that item 6 said that that its agreement would, or this memorandum of understanding would be in effect until the health concerns over the virus ended. So when the emergency order was terminated, that would also terminate the MOU. That was changed this afternoon, or it was changed. It was reflected in this afternoon's revision. So we now have that in place for quite some time. Again, how was that worded, Dole? If you'd restate that.
So it says, unless the parties agree otherwise, access to the incline shall be subject to the terms of this MOU, and the FERS shall remain in effect until a long-term solution is agreed upon by the parties. And of course, the parties are both cities.
Okay, great. Good, thank you. Okay. Council members, do we have discussion or questions for Dole? Would appear that we do not. Councilor Wilbrook, I'm sorry. And
Well,
then
there's two things that I would like to mention. One is at 1:35 this afternoon, we got some concerns from the Incline Friends. Some of those concerns I think are fixed by this late minute a change to the MOU, but I'm wondering if staff had a chance to look at that email and if perhaps if we could look at that. And then John Shada at 308, I think, sent us some things that he brought up that he wanted to have us review and talk about. And I just didn't want to miss those two things tonight.
Can't hear you, John.
I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. We can discuss Councilor Wilbrook's points. Mr. Bremner had also raised his hand, so maybe Steve, if you could make your comments, and then we'll get back to
Sure.
the other points.
I had a chance to review the MOU before I left. It was substantially the same as where it is since I got back from my trip, with the exception of that amendment that was made today. And before I left on my rafting trip, I was in agreement with it. I thought it looked pretty good. And with that enhancement that was done today, I'm in even more agreement with it.
Okay.
I had a chance to briefly peruse John Shada's proposals, and they also look good, and I think they should be discussed before we go ahead and make a motion to approve the MOU, but I'm substantially in favor of it as it stands.
Okay. All right. Thank you. In light of that, Mr. Shada, maybe you'd like to discuss your points and kind of, if you could point out where your thoughts differ from the MOU as it's been presented by staff.
Certainly. The first thing that I'd kind of like to talk about is, number one, kind of defining kind of walk-ups and people who arrive on bicycles. And if you give me a second here.
John, can you talk louder? Because you sound underwater and very far away.
I can't hear you either.
I'll sit closer. Is that better?
It's Comcast, I'm afraid.
Oh, I'm sorry. So what I wanted to, just a second, hold on. Let me bring up that document here. It seemed like Denise also had reflected on the, so in particular on the walk-up, I had suggested some language that I had sent you all in number F, All incline users shall have a reservation issued by Colorado Springs. However, incline users shall be excused from providing proof of a parking reservation as required in 1E above if they arrive on foot and if they have a current government-issued identification reflecting that they're a Manitou Springs resident. Users shall also be excused from providing proof of parking if they arrive on bicycle, one user per bicycle if they lock their bicycle in the bike rack at the entrance to the incline while they're using the incline. And then the incline attendant shall issue a parking waiver to each person who is entitled to such a waiver. So all I was trying to do was, it seemed like to me the original language kind of meant that if you just sort of showed up and said that you walked up, that you didn't have to show, you know, any proof of where you were parking.
Dole, I see. Dole, you have your hand raised. Dole?
Sure, Mr. Sheda, we've been thinking about this and processing through this, and I'll just kind of make a couple of points. All users have to have a reservation, and whether you walk up or drive into town, you count as part of the 35 for the first 2 weeks, and then 45 after that. You know, this is also premised on having the shuttle operate. And so the goal is that there is enough parking capacity that when you come into town, you can readily find a spot at Hiawatha, hop on the shuttle, and then be shuttled up to the incline. You will be able to show the incline attendant your parking receipt from Hiawatha, and you'll go and have a great time. You'll come back down, you'll ride the shuttle back into town, you go to Hiawatha, and you will go on your way, sore and sweaty. You know, I would ask the question, what does someone gain by saying that they are a walk-up? Because if they have a reservation, there's no parking on Ruxton, there's no parking at the COG, there is only the Iron Springs Chalet, Chateau, which we have incorporated and worked with them, as you saw the email from Brian. And so if someone wants to find an opportunity to walk up, they are going to have to park somewhere, and let's just assume they park in Manitou Avenue, just for the sake of the conversation. They have to pay for the meter, and then they will have to walk the 2,000 feet up Ruxton to get to the incline. So we had a spot for them for free at Hiawatha, and if they choose to go to Manitou Avenue and pay the meters, then they now have bypassed the free shuttle that will carry them up there to walk all the way up Ruxton. So our thought is that there could absolutely be people that won't be able to provide proof that they parked at Hiawatha or Iron Springs, but that will be a vast minority once they especially realize that the system is working very smoothly at Hiawatha.
Walbrook, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to add to this discussion based on what John Sheda has proposed in Dole's response. You know, I've been contacted by a lot of people who have requested that if they're a Manitou resident, this was when we were going to charge, but you know, we don't, it's some way of not to pay. But in my late afternoon polling, you know, I did receive several requests that, because as Dole says, the number of Manitou people who do the incline is a minority. There has been yet another request that they don't require a reservation. I'm passing that information on to this group because that has been requested before. It's such a small number of people that they're basically saying, if I walk up from my house or bike up from my house or whatever in Manitou and I show up, I want to bypass the reservation system. I think this is a small amount, and it just piggybacks on what John Sheda and Dole are saying. I don't know that everybody on council is going to agree with it. It's a strong feeling that I have that I don't think it's going to overwhelm the system during COVID or any other time. And I would just like to see us take care of our residents who live here and feel that living here, it's a blessing to have the incline. It's also a curse, but it feels a little bit better when you decide to do it and you just, because you live here, you get to go up and do it. Whether that's fair or not, and I'm sure all the people in Colorado Springs who are listening on this call are like, that's not fair. But I'm just saying I've gotten a lot of requests from the beginning to preserve the ability of locals to do this with less red tape. And I'm just passing those comments along tonight. Thank you.
Susan, and I agree with you. I like that idea in terms of, because I think it's a small number of people. And I think the reason for doing it is that one of the central premise issues of this whole agreement is to get the congestion, the parking issues and whatnot reduced on Ruxin. And so to me, I think if you are a local Manitou person and you walk up, I think you ought to be able to just show your essentially proof of that you're a Manitou person. I think it's very unlikely that you're going to drive around if you're from Manitou, which to me I think is one of the central premises of this thing, is that we're trying to, prototype, a new agreement. We're trying to take this opportunity during COVID where we can kind of reduce the numbers to kind of get a handle on this problem. So I totally like your idea, Susan.
Jen?
Yeah, I certainly understand that sentiment. I also am a very strong believer in data, and I think by having, at least initially, everyone making reservations would give us a much better feel of actually who is using the incline, how frequently, and so on, that we can actually base good decisions on. We don't know right now if it is a minority of Manitoids that are doing it. So I personally think that, at least initially, having a reservation system for everybody to actually size and scope what we're dealing with would be very helpful. I would also like to just say that this MOU has been kicked around for, 3 months now? And it's been through all the lawyers. I personally am ready to make a motion to approve it as it stands, with the one caveat that we got late this afternoon, because I think it actually saw or addresses a lot of the issues, that we can finesse this over time. And I think that that's a good thing. Of course, that's always been my position, but I would prefer to get this moving now. So I guess I will make a motion to approve this MOU as was sent out on Friday, with the one exception to amendment to paragraph, where's that paragraph? 6 on page 3, to change the language to until long-term solutions are agreed upon by both parties.
Motion. Do we have a second? Councillor Bremer, I see a second. Councillor Wilbrook also second. So we have it is seconded. Okay. Any further discussion? Councillor Chandler?
I too want to see this incline measure passed. However, I have a number of concerns with it. In talking to many residents and also a few council members on a one-on-one basis, so as not to violate the open meeting laws, I believe that this measure needs a little bit more teeth in it. Specifically, I want to address the fact that it doesn't really say much about incline attendees. I want it to say how many incline attendees, and that they are at the incline when the incline is open for business at all times. Secondly, I'm all for the incline shuttle to be run. I think it's great, but I am not in favor of Manitou paying for it. I would like to see Colorado Springs pay for it for a variety of reasons. We already bear the brunt of the exhaust from the incline shuttle, the wear and tear to our streets, and the traffic congestion. So we're already paying some prices there. And another issue I have is the porta potties. If we are specifically saying that we want to approve this for health and safety reasons, I do agree with the language in John Shada's proposal that states that we have one portalet for every 100 people, and that and 2 washing stations, and those are cleaned 7 days a week. Right now, Colorado Springs has agreed to clean them 6 days a week, but COVID-19 doesn't go home on Sunday. It's there on Sunday as well. And I think that we need to address the shuttle, the portalets, and the incline attendees as 3 primary issues that I have.
Thank you. Councilor Wolf?
Thank you. I think I am really pleased with this MOU as being closer to what we voted on in executive session last time than what I've seen so far. I am concerned that you could drive a Mack truck through this one loophole of walk-ups, because everybody can walk up, and Dole's explanation notwithstanding, I think it's entirely probable that people will cruise around town, maybe even take the bus. The attendant at the entrance of the incline isn't gonna really know if you got off the bus or if you walked up, or how sweaty are you to try to guess. So I think the walk-ups have to be limited to Manitou residents. I too am totally in favor of the changes that Susan suggested, and would be very happy to see those in here, that the Manitou residents do not need a reservation. I'm also sensitive to Nancy's concern about data, and I think it would be entirely reasonable for us to add a sentence in here that the attendant, who has to be there during all hours of operation, that the attendant shall keep record of how many people are allowed on the incline after they show their Manitou ID, so that we have some idea about whether the Manitoids are in the minority or not, or, you know, just to keep track of that information. That shouldn't be, you know, too tricky. I agree with Judith that we need to have an attendant there at all times. Otherwise, what's the point? I mean, this isn't the honor system. And so I think all times of operation, it has to be open. If they have to have an attendant there, and I think the attendant needs to be provided a cell phone so they can contact Manitou Police if they have any difficulties with people insisting on heading up the incline without the requisite reservations. I agree that Manitou should not and does not have the money to pay for a shuttle. If Colorado Springs wants to spring for that at over $250,000, I guess that's okay, but I really think the people in that neighborhood would be happier if we didn't have that shuttle going up and down the hill 14 times a day, every day, 7 days a week. So I'm not a fan of the shuttle requirement, and if it is a requirement, I think Springs should pay for it, not us. And finally, I did the research on porta potties online. I spent over an hour learning about porta potties, and the recommendations I found varied anywhere from 50 to 100 people per day per porta potty. So John Shada's suggestion that we have one porta potty for every 100 people, I just want you to know, is on the, I don't know if the word is conservative or liberal, but that's a lot of people using one toilet all day long. So yes, I would absolutely agree that we need to have one porta potty for each 100 people. If that's too expensive for the Springs, they can cut back on the number of reservations per day. And then I share the concern about it being not cleaned on Sunday, but I also appreciate that the business that Springs likes to contract with doesn't work Sundays. And so my proposal would be, and I think this is in John Shada's version of the MOU. I'm sorry, I'm pointing to my computer screen. That provides that an alternative is if the Saturday cleaning is done first before 9 a.m. to take care of Saturday. And if the second cleaning on Saturday is done sometime after 5 p.m., then that second cleaning after 5 p.m. would hopefully keep it clean enough on Sunday. And so that might be another way to approach it, so that we're still providing clean sanitation to our users, but not having to shut the place down on Sunday just because nobody wants to clean the toilet that day. So those would be the conditions that I would like to see before I will vote in favor. Thank you.
Denise?
Joel, do you want to mention part of the reservation system that we put in, I know for the Manitou residents, is for contact tracing. So contact tracing, so we know if somebody's up there, we then can go through and figure out who was all there at that time. So that is part of that during the COVID-19, is to make sure that we have the contact tracing. Also, the one other item I want to mention is with the shuttle, the transportation and parking board that I have spoken to, they support the shuttle. They believe that the shuttle is very important up there. So I want to share that information with you. Also, part of the shuttle, and Becca, you may be able to provide some feedback. So Becca from Finance, because I asked her about some of this too and how we got to where we are. But the Bar Trail parking lot that was signed on May 25th, 2012, part of it was to put into a parking program, and it was the funds that we got from that was to be used for the shuttle. So that is to, and we pay $1 for that parking lot to be able to utilize that parking lot and collect funding for that. Carl Springs pays, where is this? I think they pay, towards the shuttle, they pay $160,888 towards that shuttle. And Becca, you may want to talk about how we got to that at the beginning, because that shuttle, we said we use it also for the residents up there, and I don't know that history. Do you want to talk a little bit about that shuttle and how we got to where we are?
If I could, and just a time hack, we're at almost 20 minutes, so.
When the city signed an MOU about the Bar Trail parking lot, it was that the funding from the revenues from the parking would be used towards that area, and that it then included the shuttle service. And that was broken out so that by the assumption that this amount of the shuttle service was going towards that area to help alleviate the traffic congestion on that area. And that is my understanding of it.
Yeah, from that, and just so you know, in 2019, we made $283,135 from the bar parking lot, which covered pretty much, looks like most of the shuttle costs. So those are just history that I wanted to share with you.
Several council members have their hands up. Let's see. So let's make quick comments, and then I'll check with the other counselors, and I think we probably need to get to a vote here pretty quick. Counselor Chandler?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I'd like to extend the time on this discussion because it's only 7:15 p.m. and I know there've been nights that we've gone till 11:30, and this is a very, very, very important issue. And I appreciate the feedback from everyone. So as I hear everyone talking, I'm crossing things off my list and starring other things because the whole purpose is to get this passed. So that's all I wanted to say first, because I know I've already been able to speak. I would like to speak again, but I would like other counselors to have the opportunity to speak. But I would like to extend the time, at least 15 more minutes, if not 30, if that's needed.
Counselor Wolf, you've got your hand up. Counselor Wolf?
Thank you. I remember when this came up previously, I think it was when Karen appeared before us to present Colorado Springs' perspective on this. And I was questioning her about the money, and I was questioning Denise. And I don't have my notes, but I think Denise said we were shy, I don't know, $65,000 a year or something. In other words, once we paid for the shuttle, and once we got the money from the Bar Trail, and once we got the money from Colorado Springs, we still didn't break even. And I don't remember those exact dollars, but it wasn't a negligible amount of money. So even if we had the Bar Trail as full as it was in the past, we're still in the hole, spending money on a shuttle for other people, not our residents, to drive up that hill, even though it means we're going to have some serious cutbacks that really do affect our residents in other areas for money, which is tight. So I am not at all in favor of Manitou paying for the shuttle. And if Colorado Springs wants to work out a new deal with us where they pay for the shuttle and they keep the money from Bar Trail, maybe that's something we should talk about. But I'm not willing to put the city in the hole $50,000 or $75,000 for this shuttle. That seems very unnecessary in terms of what's urgent and what's important. I also don't see any reason to rush. And if we have to make a decision on this in 10 or 15 minutes and we don't get through it, I don't think that's fair to us, and I don't think that's fair to the public, but it's not up to me.
Brooke? Councilor Wilbrook?
Yes, Denise, can you just remind me one more time, and the rest of council and the public, when our contract negotiation with Mountain Metro, like what are the deadlines for that? Because, you know, as a former member of the Transportation and Parking Board, there has been discussion through the years of, you know, doing a different kind of shuttle. I don't know if it's less expensive and if there's some legal requirements as why we use Mountain West, but this isn't the time to have that whole discussion, I suppose, or maybe it is, I don't know. But there seems to be a hang up here on the shuttle, but we're under contract with them right now. And I don't know when that ends. I know we've agreed to talk about it during budget session, but I just want to throw out there that there's been other things brought up about other ways to get people up to Bar Trail and up to the incline and up Rexton, because we have a lot of residents who use that shuttle in that corridor as well, who don't do the incline or Bar Trail. But I mean, where does this fit in? I mean, when is that contract up with Mountain Metro? When do we have to start a new contract? And where does how does this fit into what Julie and Judith are mentioning and have mentioned before in previous meetings?
So this is something that I've just learned, so let me bear with you. It says, in order to make changes, you have to go through a public process, because this is a public shuttle or transit, and it would likely start for the public process in January 2021 for a spring service change. So does spring mean April, March? I don't know that, but we would have to go through a public process starting January 2021. And then that goes through the official process, and then we could look at it in the March and April. That's what I received from Mountain Metro this week.
Thank you.
So we can't make any changes for the rest of this year to our contract with our existing contract with Mountain Metro. Is that a wrong assumption?
Well, I think we could just end the shuttle if you wanted to, and that I did not get the answer because of COVID-19. We've kind of done that. Again, I will say, and this is only information, the people that I've talked to and mainly the Transportation Parking Board, they highly recommend, and several of them live along Rexton. They're recommending to keep the shuttle, and I know Dole is recommending as we enhance that experience, but that is just information I want to share in you guys' decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Yeah, I think what I'd like to do right now is just kind of go around the table here real quick and get a sense of where we all stand. I think this discussion it's gone on for 3 months. It looks to me like it could go on for quite a long time. I don't know that that's really a good idea. Mr. Bremner, I think we're in favor of taking action here pretty quick.
Yeah, I think all the points that are being raised are good points. The shuttle, Manitou residents having access to the incline without regulation, they're all good points. But as Nancy mentioned, we've been kicking this can for about 3 or 4 months now. And I think that the proposal, the MOU that Dole and Roy and Karen have come up with is pretty good. And I think these other points, we can continue discussions and we can continue to make changes. I mean, this is MOU is for now, it's not forever. And so I'm in favor of approving the MOU as it stands.
Okay, good, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem, you made the motion. it would appear that you're ready to act. So,
Yeah, I would echo Steve's comments. I mean, we entrusted staff to go out and negotiate this MOU. I think they've done it. I think that, you know, we've got the flexibility to continue working some of the points that have been made up are brought up this evening. So I would like to, I'm a believer in incremental steps. So I would like to just keep moving and get this done with and move. I just think we need to move. Thank you.
Councilor Wilbrook, your thoughts?
I didn't hear you. Who did you
Sorry,
call?
Councilor Wilbrook? Susan? Councilor Wilbrook?
Yes, sorry. For some reason, half of your words were cutting out. My not getting my long syllable name there. I'm ready to move forward and on this MOU, start this process. I do think that the news that we got today, that this would move forward past emergency declarations, was the best and biggest news that I got today. And I'm ready in an act of good faith to move forward. Not all problems are solved. And it is my hope that what Nancy and Steve said, that if we have some problems, we will have dialogue that's open and transparent, and that it will be cooperative. And I have faith in that today. And maybe I'll be found wrong. I hope not. It's always a possibility, but I'm ready to move forward.
My thought is I'm ready to move forward also. I'm, you know, greatly encouraged by the change that we had today, that that item 6, that this will not terminate with the end of the COVID emergency declaration, but rather this MOU will stand as we work into a long-term management plan. So I'm greatly encouraged by that. I'm ready to move also.
Mayor Graham, several people
Yep.
allowed to speak 2 times and I have not, and I feel
Okay.
that you are shutting me out, and I feel like
No.
we're rushing along. So I'd like
No.
the opportunity to speak.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and speak, Judith.
So first of all, while I agree with Susan Wilbrecht, Councilor Wilbrecht and Councilor Shada, I'm willing to let go of the residents being able to walk up and show their ID. I'll let that one go so that we can collect data. We can come and visit that later. I'm certainly willing to let this shuttle go, because I bet Councilor Wilbrecht brought up a really good point that we still have an open contract. So that can be in a negotiation for another day. I'm gonna say that hopefully we can figure out how to clean the porta potties and keep them clean, and I'll let that one go. The one thing I would like to see in this MOU, and I do not think I'm asking for a whole lot, is it does not specifically state where the incline attendees will be, how many, and I do agree that they need to have a communication device such as a cell phone to contact the Manitou Springs Police if they have trouble, because right now the current MOU states that it will be enforced by the El Paso County Sheriff's Department, which is in effect to me saying that it's not going to be enforced. But our Manitou Springs Police Department have to be able to respond quickly if there's a problem up there, and they have to be able to enforce this because it needs to be enforceable. So that's the one thing I would like to see in there. And other than that, I'm ready to vote for it.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Shada?
Well, I agree that the term is like a huge thing in terms of, I think that is, mitigates a lot of issues. Judith, you know, I think I addressed that in my proposal on, I believe, what is it, 2C, about the attendance being able to contact management.
John, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I don't know why. I think I had some language in my revised, my proposal on the attendants being able to contact emergency services. Were you happy with that language?
I was very happy with that language, and I would accept that if the rest of the council would accept that.
Thank you. Dole, question for you. Relative to that last remark there about, remarks, I guess I should say, from Councillor Chandler and Councillor Shada, these seem to me to be implementation details that are perhaps, far more granular than what the MOU is structured for. It would seem to me that those details could be worked out with the form of the existing MOU. What are your thoughts?
I would agree. We use language like sufficiently staffed, and I know that several people will ask to define what that means. But, I think there's a level of trust that Colorado Springs is going to staff it appropriately as they manage many other resources and attractions throughout their city. And I think it's important to remember that many of the terms of this MOU can be amended and changed as long as both parties agree. So, I do believe Colorado Springs has every best intention to properly staff it and to properly take care of it. I think some of the suggestions of giving them a quick device to coordinate with the appropriate law enforcement is an excellent idea. But I do believe that it will be appropriately staffed by the in-kind attendants. And if there is data and facts that suggest otherwise, we could work with them and we could make that right.
Thank you, Dole. Appreciate that.
Any questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion on the floor in a second. That is to accept the MOU as it was in our packet with the change that came in this afternoon with item 6, and that would call for the MOU standing. It would be in effect until we work out a long-term management plan. So that is the question before us. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. All opposed, say nay. Okay. So motion passes 5-2 with Councilors Wolf and Chandler voting nay. And I want to say I think that Councilors Wolf, Chandler, and Shada, you all made good points. I think these are implementation details that can be worked out. So I think if we go forward, we can make this work for the benefit of the community. I think it is important that we get something going pretty quickly here. Great. So thank you. That said, would you all be in favor of taking a 10-minute break?
Thank you.
Okay, 10-minute break. So I've got 7:31. Let's come back at 7:41. Thank you.
John,
Yes.
Mayor,
Yes.
you don't
Yes.
you have not muted, so I don't know if you want to mute before you go.
Oh, that's a good point. Thank you. I was just going to go off and find my Alzheimer's medicine.
So that'll be exciting if they can spruce that up a bit. And if you've got ideas, please forward them. They're working with a contractor on the Soda Springs Park design elements for the western end of Soda Springs Park. And those final drawings should be completed by the middle of August. So that's great. And they're also working on their relationship with the pollinator group and the tree group to establish roles, rules, relationships, et cetera, et cetera. And the match committee met a couple of weeks ago. You should have all gotten a email from Neil Minch, who they elected as their chair. And they will be meeting again next Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember. Next Thursday, I believe. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next? Councilor Bremner, you've been on vacation, so maybe you don't have anything, but do you, Steve?
Yeah, you can see the scene on my background is where I was this morning. My last campsite of the trip. So it's a wonderful 8 days, just relaxing. Nothing on my plate except going down the river to make it to the next place. A couple hikes along the way. It was great. So I'm back and we're back at it.
Thank you. Councilor Chandler, I think you raised your hand there. Yeah.
I think you said my name. I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Judith. Yeah, please.
A couple things. OSAC met on July 27th. It was a 187-page packet, so I'll only mention two things. One, Amy Yarger from the Butterfly Pavilion will be coming out on the 24th of August to take a hike with Dylan Becker, myself, and Melody Doherty, hopefully Christine Lowenberg and Amy herself, to look at the open space and how it relates to the pollinator project and how we can also be supportive. And I particularly really feeling positive about the possibility of accessing Waldo Canyon via the Black Canyon open space, and that was one of the things we were talking about, and so many other things that are really awesome. So kudos to OSAC. I am so happy to announce that Manitou Behavioral Health, which is an initiative that has been spearheaded by Police Chief Brian Churchill in collaboration with Aspen Point, to have a brick and mortar presence for mental health triage services in Manitou. We'll be signing a contract with the MAP, and we have been gifted the first year of rent, including from the Manitou Springs Community Foundation and other Manitou citizens who were very generous. So we have our first year of rent, so we're moving forward with that. Really excited. And lastly, I just wanted to say kudos to Administrator Howell and the Finance Department. That was really, really encouraging financial news tonight about the budget. And to also give a shout out to everybody who negotiated on the incline MOU, Dole Grebnick, Roy Cheney, Denise Howell, and everyone. I respect the decision that was made, and I think that we'll have some robust discussions moving forward, but a tremendous amount of negotiating, hard work, and I'm really proud of you, so thanks for that. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Mr. Shada, do you have anything?
Nothing to report, sir.
Okay. Councilor Wolbrook?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I want to say, Judith, you always do such a good job of wrap up. Thank you for that. Before I give you my council correspondence, Nancy, Mayor Pro Tem, and I participated in the 2-day workshop that kind of dealt with problem solving and well, we kind of dealt with some theoretical, hypothetical questions that ended up kind of sounds like from Judith Chandler's report working out. But I just wanted to say that training was really excellent. It was 2 days, and it was brain bending. I do think that there are some things from that could be beneficial both for council and for boards. One of them is identifying what kind of personality you are, and in a different way than maybe other, like Myers-Briggs and others. This was a good exercise. We didn't get to do as much of it as we probably would have liked to, and I identified myself, and Mayor Pro Tem thought maybe I could have done a little different job with that, which just goes to show it was a good, in a good way, because if we had those kind of conversations, I think it could be really good for us to have that kind of dialogue, something to consider for the future. And the other thing was mapping problems. And the most amazing thing about this exercise in mapping problems, and I've done a lot of these kinds of trainings over the years, was that this was hard, but it was done without any fighting. It wasn't divisive, and we all had different opinions about how to solve a problem, but we mapped it, and it was a very productive exercise. And it's another piece of training that I think could be very helpful in the future for councils or boards and commissions. Again, valuable experience and some pieces and parts of that I think could benefit us and by default our entire community. I've gotten a lot of council correspondence on the incline. We've got a lot of council correspondence on COVID, particularly face masks. I appreciate all of it. No matter what side you're on, it's very educational for me to hear your perspectives. I do want you to know that I read them all. I don't always get to respond to them all, but I do appreciate them. And if it's something that I can weave into the agenda because it's something that's on there, I try to do that for you too. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Susan. Julie. Julie, do you have anything?
The only correspondence or communications I've received this past week pertain to the incline.
Thank you. And, seems like the correspondence I've received is the volume has diminished quite a bit this week. Although today it picked up on the incline again. So, but I think you've all seen that as well. I did have some communication with Rob Dannon regarding the efforts he's trying to put together for the library. I think that's a little premature, but I'll just mention that. And I know that Councillor Chandler had also spoken with him. And so Judith, thanks for doing that. That was good of you to discuss things with him. So that's all I've got. Let's go on to the city administrator's report.
Tonight, you just have me. Roy is on a much-deserved vacation. He'll be back on Monday, and I can't wait. But I'll give you a couple of quick updates. You saw that the imposter page has been taken down, and the city has been working on that for years. So a shout out to Jeff Parker and to Alex and for getting that managed. So thank you very much for that. As you can see, budget, we're doing budget meetings pretty regularly right now, looking at preparing the 2020 budget and starting to look at those things. So putting a lot of time in that. Dealing with numerous parking concerns, and a shout out to Kevin and all he's doing with the parking side. And then Councillor Chandler did mention the mental health, which we are really excited about as we move forward and get ready to sign it. So a thank you to everybody in the community that gave and the individuals that gave so we could get 1 year paid. I've reached out to Tessa, and we're getting Tessa connected with the school district and also with the police. And then I'm looking at doing training for all of our staff in the near future. And Tessa does that with a variety of businesses. So we'll be working on that. Probably not in the next month, probably, sometime. I can't say if it's the next 2 or 3 months. They just hired a new executive director. So I've got to let them get set up and go from there. One of the things that Councillor Wahlberg mentioned that was great in the training that I've learned and that I brought to my department heads meeting is killer statements, and they're not allowed to be used. So we really talk about how not to do killer statements, but how to listen and hear everybody, and then how can we move on from there. So that's been great. And a shout out to Alex for face mask. He went out to all the businesses over the last 2 days and handed out things for them to put on their door. All the ones up north, we've reached some of them a little bit further north, west. And then on the east side, we're trying to get to them also. We have different signs that we're putting up. So we're really trying to get the word out about the mask. And then as you saw, we've had a couple of water breaks. And so staff has been working on that. Shout out to Public Works. They really are doing a creative way to manage. They're doing 410s right now so that we have staff Monday, 7 days a week. So we have a group that works Saturday through Wednesday and a group that works Wednesday through Sunday. And it's really managing the overtime and also to make sure we have somebody on call on the weekends and doing that. So we're trying it at this point to see how it goes. So I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to the last item. That's an executive session. And I'll read that, and then we'll need a motion to go into executive session, and we'll need to make a transition. It's an executive session to hold a conference with the city attorney for legal advice pursuant to section 5.1C of the Manitou Springs City Charter concerning an employee complaint. Okay. So
moved.
So we have a motion. Do we have a second on that? We'll make the second then. All in favor?
I,
to go
I
into
thought we had to say the whole thing. Did you just go ahead and say the whole thing? Because
Yes, yeah. Nancy read the whole thing. Yeah. So you want to second it, Judith? Okay, that's fine then. All in favor of going into executive session, say aye. Aye. Okay, that looks unanimous.
John, could I ask a question of who is going to be involved in the executive session?
That's a good point.
Can I just, one quick thing, when we
Yep.
go into executive session, know that you gotta shut down this one, and then Judy sent out a new one. So that way we have it, and I can control it better. So I just wanna, that we've done that. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that transition's always a little bit tricky. So for this meeting, we want council members and Mr. Parker. I see Julie, you have your hand raised.
I was just going to say the same thing. I was going to recommend that for this meeting, we have council members and Mr. Parker.
Okay.
So how do you want me out of this meeting? Is that what
I was going to suggest if council's comfortable with it, I would ask that Denise be excused.
So I got to figure out how I'm going to run the meeting. So I'll have to start it. Jeff, I guess I'll start it. I can't send it to you. I'll have to walk out, keep it recorded. And then Jeff, can you just text me and say it's over?
That works for me.
Okay. Okay. If that works for everybody. So I'll have to get on, start the recording, and then step out.
And then you would be excused. Now, will that work technically okay, Denise will be running it and Judy would be excused, is that?
No, you're saying you want me excused, right? You want me excused?
I'm going to have you excused, yeah, but, well, then maybe it'd be best to have Judy stay and run the meeting.
Oh, Judy.
This is a technical question. What's the best way to do this? But I think the intent was that we wanted to excuse you, Denise.
Denise wouldn't be part of the meeting if she just.
Right.
Right, I'll just step out.
She could still be the one to host it, to start it. And then once it started, like she said, she could actually leave meeting so the recording is being done like it needs to be. And then if she's receives a text, when she can come back into her office to resume the follow-up on that, getting back out of the executive session.
Sounds like we've got a plan then. Okay. All righty. Okay, I think should we like take a 5-minute break and come back then? Would that be?
Have everyone confirm that they did receive the executive session link that I sent out about just before 6 o'clock. It was about 5:30-ish.
I don't know yet, Judy. I have to check.
Okay.
I don't know either.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I don't know either.
I will stick around for a few minutes. If anybody get it, let me know. Send me an email and I will send it to you.
Okay, will do.
Okay.
Okay, so we should log out and then log back in. Okay.
Right. So.
All right. See you all in a few minutes.